podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, the world's leading international professional body which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. I'm your host, Simone Sweeney, and in this new series, Getting Started as a Coach, I'm excited to introduce you to experts and coaching thought leaders who will share their passion and experience to help new and aspiring coaches get the insight and information they need to understand the industry, make more informed decisions, and successfully start out in the world of coaching. I'm delighted to welcome George Warren as my first guest as we start navigating the world of coaching in this new series from the Association for Coaching podcast. Since experiencing the transformational benefits of coaching himself, George has been on a powerful journey that has seen him train as a coach, establish his own successful practice, become faculty at the Academy of Executive Coaching, and also volunteer with the Association for Coaching. He may also be a familiar voice to some of you from his past series, including The Conscience of Coaching. George is at the leading edge of coaching, innovation, and evolution, and his journey, as well as his passion and curiosity, make him an ideal first guest as we start to explore the path into coaching. George, thanks so much for joining us, and welcome.
Hey, Simone. Thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
So I'm going to start and ask you to define what coaching is. And I'll share the words of Sir John Whitmore, who could be seen as the founder of executive coaching as a profession, who said that coaching is unlocking people's potential to maximize their own performance. And it's helping them to learn rather than teaching them. What's your definition of coaching? What does it mean to you?
So I've got a bit of a get out of jail free card when it comes to definitions. And what I say is that coaching can be viewed as something of an umbrella term these days. And if you look at how diverse and how differently it's used, it's very, very, very hard to define it. And I don't have a snazzy soundbite, but for example, you've got folks that are consultants calling themselves coaches. You've got folks that are mentors calling themselves coaches. And one of the concerns in the industry is that coaching has become such a cool and sexy word that folks that aren't coaches are calling themselves coaches. My belief in coaching is related to evoking awareness. So there's something for me around helping someone become more aware, become more attuned. And you'll notice that I don't set any particular goal or outcome there, because sometimes in my experience, the need for a goal and the sort of the desire for an outcome can actually lead to a bit of anxiety and can make someone feel deficient, not good enough, or broken. So if I were pushed, it would be something around evoking awareness.
I love that as a definition because it creates the space for coaching to be what it needs to be for the individual or the team that you're working with. And you touched on something that's a really interesting dimension when you think of looking at coaching kind of from the outside in, and that is the difference between something like coaching and mentoring or coaching and therapy. How do you position coaching against those areas?
It's a really, really important question. Right. And to be very, very clear, it takes someone, maybe 7 days to get qualified as a professional coach, and it can take 7 years to become qualified as a psychotherapist. So the stakes of someone's mind, of someone's psyche are really high. So I'm very pleased to hear that we're giving space to the utmost ethical importance, which is being very, very clear around the boundaries of coaching and the boundaries with psychotherapy or counseling or something more mentoring or consultative. And the really interesting paradox for me in the sort of yin to that yang is that a lot of coaching techniques have their roots in psychotherapy and in the work of particularly people like Carl Rogers. And my own coaching style is therapeutic. I think talking to someone who isn't going to judge you, that shows you curiosity, is helpful. And yet I'm not a psychotherapist. So part of the work of effective coach training and effective supervision and effective accreditation is being really clear on that boundaries so that the coach and client can both be very, very clear when we might be approaching the boundary with something else. and to know what to do about it. And in more often than not, that's a case of the coach recontracting and talking about it. So one helpful metaphor that I like to work with sometimes is when it comes to things like consulting or even mentoring, this idea of, I think it was a quote from Miles Downey, above whose head is the thought bubble here? If the thought bubble is above the coach's head, you might well be working a bit too hard and you might be doing a bit too much of the work for your client. You might be a mentor or a consultant in coach's clothing. So one thing that's great and so powerful about coaching, and actually one of the downsides and where people find a lot of stuckness or resistance to coaching, is that it's often the client who has to do some of the harder work. It's often the client's resourcefulness, the client's know-how that is mined and explored. That as a coach, you're stepping into the client's world as opposed to bringing the client into your world.
I love that description, where you're looking at who's doing the work in that solution and the different roles that the coach or the mentor or a consultant are playing. And I think that's one of the areas that's difficult when you're starting on that coaching journey, is to relate to is what is the boundary of your role, and to shift focus. And, like you, I come from a corporate background and have decided to focus on coaching. And I'm curious as to what inspired you to shift your focus and become a coach full time.
Thanks for asking. It's a very important decision and chapter of my life, and I haven't looked back since. So I remember the room I was in London in my coach training, which was with the AOEC. And the AOEC has a very experiential style of learning. So you get coached and you observe coaching and you coach every day of the course. And I used the opportunity of being coached just to work through, what do I want out of my life? And particularly feelings of stuckness and feeling not good enough that I could change career and be as successful and as well thought of and as well comfortable and respected in another industry. So being coached helped me give voice to those thoughts, feelings, insecurities. It helped me separate them from myself. I had some objectivity to them. And like a good coaching session, I had some assumptions I was making challenged. So essentially, while I signed up to the coaching qualification to just harness my skills so that I could be more effective in my role, I decided to quit the job between modules 2 and 3 of the course and decided to set up there and then George Warren Coaching. And I was affirmed by a deep feeling that I'd rather give it a go and fail, and to know that I gave it a go, than to play it safe and stay stuck, stay in my comfort zone and be that sort of bitter old man that says, I wish I'd given that a go, and engage with that resentment that, I wish I'd taken more of a risk. So yeah, being coached helped me connect with the energy within my soul and my spirit and my gut to give coaching my best shot.
Thanks for sharing that. I think the journey that people take into coaching is so personal, but is an essential part of the experience and something that you relate to as you go. And like you in the same instance, it was coaching that made this a curiosity for me. I had been coached multiple times in my career, and the fourth round was about 2 years ago. And I really saw the reflection through the reflective practice and the program that I wasn't where I wanted to be anymore. And it was coaching that piqued my interest. But that's what I think a lot of people are seeing when they're coaching, is they're partnering with people who are stuck or have an opportunity at hand and need that support to kind of go further with it and find their way through it. And the process of the coach training that I went through, and like you, I also trained at the Academy of Executive Coaching. That reflection was a great trigger for, I think, my empathy and connection to the people I'm working with. And, as we have both said, that coaching journey is very personal and very different. But when you think of a new coach or someone who's aspiring to become a coach, what are some of the questions they could be asking themselves to explore if coaching is a great path for them?
It's a lovely question. So I think, and in my AOEC role and other roles, I have a lot of interesting conversations and exposure to not only new coaches, but those that are getting trained in coaching and wondering, can I make a career out of this? So in terms of the lay of the land of work as a coach, there is, of course, internal coaching roles. And there is coaching as part of a wider suite, whether that's in the people team, L&D teams. Coaching can be a skill that you bring in and absorb into your current role in leadership or other. And then for those that want to step away and maybe set up their own business, there's something of a myth that coaches spend all their time coaching. And I think in the years I've been in this industry, I think I've met one person who's only an executive coach for everything they do. I think the reality is that for more folks, coaching is part of a suite of services and interventions. For example, maybe facilitation, consulting, leadership development, and or things like supervision or mentor coaching or writing, podcasting, lots of things. So I think for anyone thinking about making the switch to a coach, I would just offer some thoughts around how you can see yourself making it work, and maybe to do some researches around the financial side of things, what numbers you need to hit in order to make this sustainable as a practice for you, and to consider whether it is only coaching you want to do, or whether it's coaching and something else.
I think that's great advice. And, many people will likely explore coaching as part of a portfolio career, particularly after, the great resignation of COVID. One of the things they've talked a great deal about within the UK, for example, or, as people move into a later phase of their life where they're thinking more long term about how they can work, but maybe introduce some of their passions and interests. You've mentioned some of the more conventional ways of working as a coach in terms of setting up your own business or working as an internal coach. Are there other things that are a typical scenario that a coach may work in?
Well, it's one of the fascinating things is that the industry's it's constantly changing. It's constantly diversifying. There are folks that are working very creatively with AI and tech. There are folks that still don't like to work online and still do their coaching face to face, and there's kind of everything in between. One of the interesting factors is that maybe 30 years ago in the 90s there weren't that many coaches, and the work seemed to be exclusive to often leadership positions, often in more corporate roles. And what's happened as coaching has got so popular and become such a sought after and respected way of supporting and developing someone or a team, the market for coaching has grown massively. So you've got, I do a lot of work in the second sector, public health and education, as well as the third sector in sort of charity and not for profits. And what that can mean is that, yes, the market for coaching is expanding, but also the number of coaches joining the market are expanding. So there's a constant tension between supply and demand. And I think a really clear-eyed look at how many coaches are making a living or able to make a living from just coaching is a really valuable and under-discussed topic for those folks who are thinking about making a career change. And it might be, yes, you get added autonomy and flexibility, and yes, the work you do might make you feel happier than what you've been previously doing in your role. But often folks might need to take a pay cut in order to transition into their new career. And there aren't many folks talking about the financials or the numbers of coaching. And one of the really strange things is before I switched to coaching full time, you just never seem to see anyone's pricing online. There's a real, let's have a chat first and then I'll tell you how much I charge nature, which I find very strange and very curious. So that can be quite frustrating and quite difficult for those folks that are thinking, well, gee, I'd like to coach full time, but also I don't know how I can make it work. And then, Simone, you've got much larger coaching tech companies, for example, BetterUp and CoachHub, who are coming in and who are offering coaches a high volume of coaching, often for a much lower rate than 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So what's happened in the last 30 years is that the average price per hour of coaching has plummeted to the point now where you've got a cottage industry even evolving of organizations that will ask coaches to coach for free. And they'll say, well, I'll just give you some practice hours for your accreditation. So in terms of sustainability of the financials and business practice, it can be really tricky for new coaches thinking about coming into the markets and how to make it all work.
I think it's great to hear you talking about the realities of it, George. When you are moving into any new endeavor, understanding the landscape you're working within is critical. And the money that you are going to be able to generate is, of course, a critical consideration, particularly for those people who are transitioning from a different career, for example, as I have done. And it is surprising that so few people are sharing the pricing openly. You wouldn't buy a new product without knowing how much it costs. Typically, the vast majority of things that someone consumes, they're seeing that pricing. So there is this incredible duality between the let's say lack of transparency potentially in pricing as you're planning that as a new coach, as well as your positioning, and then the commoditization of coaching through things like some of the platforms and these kind of almost barter systems. So it's a really great piece of advice for a new or aspiring coach to consider what that reality looks like and what their threshold or tolerance is within it to see how viable it is. So in a similar vein, what are some of the essential skills or qualities that make a coach effective?
Oh, well, my heart is singing hearing that question. Occasionally someone will get in touch with me asking if I can work with them as their supervisor to help them with the first few years of their coaching. And I've got pretty good in a couple of questions figuring out what's really, really driving folks, to the point where if someone is saying, well, I quite like the lifestyle, I'm tired of my corporate job, I want to work for myself, coaching seems like a cool way of helping people, but also it's more about being my own boss and choosing when I work. I'm personally and professionally increasingly less keen to work with someone who just wants to be a coach because they like the lifestyle. What I really connect with is the energy and the spirit of really wanting to profoundly help someone with some of the big stuff, the big questions, the big challenges in their work or in their life. And I think having a heart connection and having a keenness to really help people is such a strong driver. And that's what makes working in the coaching industry so nice, is that I'm every day speaking to and surrounded by lovely people that want to help. But also one of the key attributes of a quality or effective coach, I believe, is humility. Humility that we don't have the answer, that we don't have the magic solution, we don't have the perfect piece of advice to tell the other person. That if someone comes to us, that belief that the resourcefulness is somewhere within them somewhere, and that if we hit those particular magic set of competencies and those lovely human qualities of listening, asking questions, leading with curiosity, holding space, withholding our judgment, and there is a very strong Carl Rogers person-centered approach here. That belief that if we just simply provide the soil, the sun and the water, that the person in front of us will bloom and blossom. So I think that belief in the process and that ability to manage our own stuff so that we can lead with curiosity and generosity and love to the person in front of us, that for me is one of the key differentiators between okay coaching or average coaching and quality and effective coaching.
That's a beautiful answer, George. How you look at the intent and the individual kind of behaviors and capabilities of the coach in creating an environment where the client or the coachee that they're working with can discover those things that are going to be powerful agents of change or something that will help them relate and take an opportunity, solve a problem, etc., are critical within that. And I think that's been one of the more profound parts of learning for me on the coaching journey is how much connection there really must be between your business life and your strengths, your characteristics, those things that make you the unique individual that you are, and how coaching can help to help that flourish is a really powerful effect that it's not that I didn't quite expect, but I didn't see as being such a strong part of the coach's toolkit. And when you think a little bit about a coach having a toolkit, what are some of the tools or resources that are useful for a new coach to have?
Well, you've caught me in a very kindly and playfully provocative time of the year and of my coaching journey. And one thing I mention to folks is that sometimes when we're learning to coach and in the first few years of our coaching, perhaps, maybe beyond, there can be something very attractive about holding on to a structured process. For example, something like the GROW model or a sort of simple linear structure. And what that can manifest in is a bit of an anxiety about going off piste and the need to do it right and follow the process to the letter. And so one offer I share to the coaching world and all the listeners is to just check in with yourself. What's my relationship to structure and control in the coaching session? And if I'm clinging to the side of the pool, white knuckles, what might that mean? How might that harm the relationship and the effectiveness? What am I modeling to my coach if I'm feeling a little bit too anxious to let go of not knowing and to bring in some vulnerability or try something totally new or improvise a new technique? So in my experience so far, what I offer is for coaches to really engage with their intuition, their gut feeling. And I trust the coaches and I trust the client's intuition more than I trust a lot of techniques and tools. There is my approach is heavily involved by Gestalt and presence and the idea that the person opposite us or the coach listening to this conversation is not deficient. That actually some of those very, very core human qualities, the ability to check in how we feel, the ability to notice our own sort of body metaphors, the ability to actively listen and show empathy, and to lead with curiosity. I think these are the core coaching skills, and I back them more than I do any particular coaching tool or technique. Something I said earlier today, again, a very Gestalt approach, but in a way, us as coaches, our body is our best coaching tool. So if a client is speaking and you suddenly notice a tightness in your chest, there is data in that. And it's very appropriate, and depending on which code of competencies you adhere to, it's encouraged to notice that. Oh, wow. As you say that, I'm noticing a sense of fizziness in my chest, sort of bubbles. It might not be anything, but I wonder if that's helpful for you. And of course, we are sensitive, relational mammals. We've got mirror neurons firing all the time, picking up on all sorts of data. To offer that to your client and help them engage with how they really feel and what they're really experiencing and offer it lightly is a very, very, very powerful intervention, which speaks to a relational approach to coaching. So we all have a coaching toolkit. I really support that, and I challenge the need or over-reliance on that toolkit or structure, as opposed to using our bodies, our emotions, our souls, our spirits, our gut feelings, using our humanity. I think that's one of our we're talking now, Simone, in an era where an AI bot can pretty much effectively coach using a very structured coaching model as a human. So if we think 3, 5, 10, 20 years into the future, what are the human skills? What are the human qualities that AI can't replicate and better than us? And it's in our humanity, in our imperfections, in our silliness and creativity. And that's the style of coaching which I really espouse, being totally real, totally in the moment, totally human.
It's an incredible thing to maybe shift focus for those people who are new into coaching from a more structured, contained, formal way of working to something that is so led by their human character traits, whether it's intuition, kindness, empathy, and that coaching space is critical, where all of those things will kind of trust and flourish. One of the things that I've experienced as a newer coach, and I hear some of my colleagues and those people I met along my coaching journey say, is that they're almost suffering from not quite a crisis or confidence. Maybe it's a little bit more imposter thinking, but feeling that they have the authority and the experience to create a space like that and to bring forward so many of these kind of softer traits that are so important to a coaching relationship. How can a new coach or someone who just needs that extra support in those types of situations and spaces, what are some of the tools or tips you could offer to help them build up their confidence in working kind of from the heart as much as from the head?
Yeah, and let me first say I can totally relate to your experience there and what you've heard from others. It's there's something really strange about the learning journey of a coach, in that you learn these skills and competencies so that you can dance sort of freely around them with a bit more flow. The image coming to my mind is that of a jazz musician who you will learn the notes and the scales and the harmonies so that you can then go away from them and play around with them and create something totally new in the moment, and then come back to them if you need to. So for me, there's something about a lot of coaching approaches and structures and even competencies that resonates with that. We learn so that we can dance around them and do so without being in our own heads. So your question was, what can some new coaches do? The learning doesn't stop when you get your certificate or your diploma. The learning, one reason I'm signed up, as long as I've got the mental faculty, hopefully for the next 60 years or so, into coaching, is that to be a coach, I believe, is to subscribe to not knowing and to curiosity, and to lead with a sense of honoring your own imperfections. I don't think anyone is the perfect coach. I don't think anyone will be the perfect coach. And if they say they are, A, drop me an email, but B, you might be missing something. So to really, really believe that, Simone, to really accept that you will always be both good enough and not good enough at the same time, is a beautiful way of modeling what it means to be human, which is we are perfectly imperfect. We all are. And in what you say about imposter syndrome and other forms of self anxiety or self-consciousness, there is a degree, I think, of trusting the process, but also acceptance of our imperfections, and to really bring those in and honor those. More practically, supervision is a very, very, very valuable, restorative, nourishing, and fun place of learning. And the paradigm shifts, the great paradigm shifts in my coaching have not come from reading a book. And I'm very sorry to say, not come from listening to a podcast or from taking some webinars or certificates. The big shifts for me in my work and my effectiveness as a coach, my confidence and my competence as a coach have come all in the supervision space. And that sense of community, that sense of coming together and having a place where you can just be, where you can just share, where you can learn, where you can make mistakes and have that goodness and that worth as a coach not only discussed and noticed, but encouraged that it shines out of you even more. It's very, very, very valuable for me, and I've always invested in supervision and always will do. So that's what I'd encourage folks is to remember that you don't get the bit of paper and you don't pass your coaching exam and then you're away as a coach. Coaching and coach training, supervision, mentor coaching, it's for life, not just for Christmas.
I love how you have responded to that, George, with the metaphor of the jazz singer. So like a musician, a coach is likely to have experienced a strong platform of training, but they're also bringing their personal experiences and their human characteristics into the music and into the coaching relationship, if you continue that metaphor. But there's also a strong degree of improvising and intuition, and following the music or following the client's lead very strongly is key within coaching as well. So that experience set, as well as the grounding in education, but supported by supervision, is a really good, I think, signpost for someone who's fairly new into coaching or thinking about coaching as some of the key ingredients. And you mentioned how you have continued your professional development and followed your own curiosity, webinars, podcasts, books, and supervision obviously being the kind of key lever within your experience set. How important is it for a coach to continue their professional development on an ongoing basis?
So, in the many roles I have, all of them ping with the answer of very. And I'm very sensitive that, particularly for someone who's maybe self-funding their coaching training, that can be X number of £1,000s. And then you're saying, I've got to go for accreditation as well. And then you're saying, I've got to go for supervision. Plus, I bought all these books. So there's a big outlay still in for those that want to receive that quality executive coaching training. And yet there is something so important about supervision. Coaching is lonely work. It is lonely work. You are, in a typical day, spending a lot of time inhabiting the worlds of other folk and providing that very important space for them and working with some strong emotions. And particularly in those first few years of our career, it can be an invitation for our inner critics to come out and shout at us and tell us how rubbish we are and how unhelpful that session was and how ineffective we are. And supervision is, a tonic and one very helpful way of rebalancing and connecting with your inner and some external supporters and champions of you and your work and your value. And I think, more than that, hopefully, as you experienced on your coach training, there is something really valuable about making sure that you are doing no harm to the person opposite you. And this is where, for example, I have a bit of a concern about the many thousands of folks on, let's say, Instagram who are calling themselves coaches, often based out of Bali, it seems, and who are selling these multi-$1,000 packages, which are often the same topics as folk are taking to executive coaching or qualified life coaching. And yet they're selling something that is potentially doing a lot more harm without any training, without any accreditation, without any supervision. So there is a safety element, which at the very, very baseline is I'm doing no harm to my client or wider stakeholders. And I am investing in my own ethical exploration and maturity. And I'm ensuring that I am remaining competent as a coach. So there's that baseline. It's sometimes said, I think one of the phrases sort of banded around when I was learning was for every 20 hours of coaching, around about 1 hour of supervision. But I think for folks earlier on in their careers, I certainly found in my developments nearer 1 in every 10 or 15 hours I was coaching. I was really, really benefiting from the challenging aspect of supervision, from the restorative and supportive element of supervision, but also supervision being such a learning space as well, to get resources, to hear about different techniques, to practice techniques on, if it's group supervision, for the first time and have them practiced onto you. So I fly the flag very proudly of supervision, because it's an important respect you're showing the client by undertaking it. It's an important investment you're making in yourself and your continued well-being and effectiveness. And more buyers of coaching, more and more folks and potential clients, as coaching becomes more mainstream, are figuring out, okay, so let me just check if this potential coach I'm going to work with, and we're going to bring a coach in, are they going through supervision or not? And what might that be saying about them if they are or they're not? So there's something of a safety in practice as well. So for any buyers of coaching out there, one of those really important questions is to anyone you're working with, just check if they're working in supervision or not, check if they're professionally qualified, and check if they're accredited or not, and hear what they say about any of those answers.
Great. And supervision, I think, is absolutely a critical support mechanism for a coach. Doesn't matter if they're new in or late into their experience set. And certainly the journey you describe of going through the training and the investment in that, and the reading that you're doing, and then supervision kind of coming in, I think is something that a lot of coaches, and certainly I struggled with in those early days, is understanding where is right to invest your time and possibly your quite precious funds against it. But supervision certainly is a transformative experience, and something that we're going to explore further in the series, which is fantastic to hear you speaking about it with such energy. Beyond supervision, are there other practical places people can continue their professional development?
Well, yeah, of course there are, and it kind of depends on the speed and the appetite and energy for more learning, more reflection. There is, and I guess I offer something of a counterweight to that, which is, it can be helpful to check if we've got this path of accreditation levels laid out in front of us. And if there's another course, there's a follow-on course. Oh, and there's a course on this. I'm really interested in this. And there's another course. Oh, and I know about this already, but seeing as there's a course available, I'll just take another course. There is a danger that if coaches, and especially new coaches, if we buy into the idea that we are not good enough and we are deficient, and only if we get this level of accreditation or this level of certification, or if we have X number of coaching hours, there is a danger that if we constantly overly index with the I'm not good enough voice, that we will forever be on a journey of not being good enough. So there's a sort of challenge of, yes, it's very important to invest in safe, sound, effective practice and whatever support that means. It can be tempting to hide behind another course and say, oh, I'll take this course and then I'll do that. Then I'll put myself out there, or then I'll have that conversation with that person. And I just want to playfully offer those two competing ideas and offer folks the idea of charting a course whereby, hey, what if you're already good enough as a coach? What if you don't need that extra course? What if the core skills you developed on day one of your course, what if they are adequate and enough for you to really, really help that person in front of you? And what if bringing in more models will actually be working against you and get in the way and confuse you, bring more noise in? So there's that tension, Simone, between, yes, continued investment, and also, yes, you are already a competent, good enough coach. And you might not need that extra investment in order to be the coach that you want to be.
I think that's a very important perspective to bring across, George, and thank you for saying so. I think for a lot of people within any kind of professional capacity, there is often, if that is of interest to you, that path of continuing education rather than practical application is tempting. But finding that balance between doing and learning is important for those in the coaching industry, while also still creating the space to follow those things that will be additive and are relevant. reflecting on what that additive education or exploration will bring you, I think is also critical. If you're working towards accreditation and moving through the levels, or you're looking to maybe add another dimension to your coaching, for example, adding NLP if you haven't studied in that, or a team coaching element, understanding the place for that and relating that to your experience and to the time you're actually delivering the coaching, and seeing whether that helps your offering, whether that helps your energy, whether that helps your clients, probably is the most profound statement. So I think it's important to think of CPD and further stepping through the coaching paths as understanding what the value will bring. I'm wondering if you have a surprising learning from your coaching journey, something that you've experienced that you didn't expect when you started out.
I had an assessment for an advanced diploma recently, and I chose to use the metaphor of the Wizard of Oz as to speak to my coaching journey, heavily influenced by the work of folks like Carl Jung. I used Dorothy and Tin Man and the Wicked Witch of the West and the Scarecrow to speak to the different competing parts of my personality, my identity as a coach, and the different characteristics I can bring. And for example, he is on a journey around courage. So he thinks, if I get to the Emerald City and the Wizard of Oz, then the Wizard of Oz will give me courage. And there's a really interesting double parallel there for me with coaching, in that my own journey, to see my earlier point, I've always thought, if only I can get this, then I'll be a good enough coach. When in fact, the learning for me is that I am already complete and whole. I am already good enough as a coach. And all of the courage or clever questions or intuition, all of the coaching skills I already need, I believe, are already within me. And it's a lovely, accepting feeling to really bring in and embody. And it also speaks to the journey sometimes of maybe working with a coach. A client might think, I have this problem. I need a coach to come and coach me and fix me and cure me. So I'm going to spend my money and time on bringing someone in who can then tell me what to do, or etc. And that's one of those myths swirling around, particularly folks that aren't so familiar with coaching and coach training, is that the idea that coaching is done to the other person. Whereas in fact, true to the journey that Dorothy and the others go on, the Wizard of Oz, this great avatar, is just a guy behind a curtain putting some levers. And it could be argued that us coaches, we're just the Wizard of Oz. We're just human. We have our own imperfections. We're not magicians. We're not gurus. And all of the resourcefulness, all of the know-how, all of the brilliance and wonderfulness is already within Dorothy and her friends. So, yeah, it took me a number of years to go on that journey, and maybe the journey is the way, maybe the journey is the learning, and I wouldn't have changed a thing. But to answer your question, it would be very interesting to know what would be different if I had believed in myself fully as a whole, complete, resourceful, able person and coach from day one.
Thank you for sharing that. It's an incredible kind of reflection, and one that as a coach to be able to bring back to yourself and consider is very powerful indeed. You've shared a number of myths as we've been talking. Is there one myth that you'd like to bust about coaching?
Oh, what a lovely question. Yeah. So the one that really comes to my mind time and time again is non-directive coaching is a myth. And, ever since I've been learning to coach, I've been really interested in the unfurling climate crisis. Right now, as we're recording, it's record temperatures ever. Europe is burning and the world is flooding
everywhere.
So, it's real. It's happening. It's happening right now. And it's going to get a lot worse before it gets any bit better. And, there is a section of the coaching industry that says, well, it's not really us. We can't really do this. We've got to follow the client's agenda. That's what my coach training told me, or that's what I think I heard from all these competencies and rules and shoulds on my training. And then you've got another really interesting, very diverse section and growing section of coaches all around the world of different locations and backgrounds saying, hang on, what about if we could use these coaching skills that we've got, self-management, working with strong emotions, challenging mindsets, behavior change, compassion. What if we could use these skills to help with this meta unfolding perma-crisis that's happening? And I've run lots of webinars. I've hosted a lovely series with this wonderful AC team, Coaching in the Climate Crisis, where I spoke to some of the most interesting and beautiful voices in that space. And time again, if you listen to those episodes, you'll hear this idea that non-directive coaching is a myth. We are always directing as a coach, even if we ask any question, if we share any intervention, if we hold the silence, if we say, tell me more, if we breathe loudly, if I raise an eyebrow, if I move my hand, we're always directing. So I challenge the idea that you always need to follow the client's agenda, because what about life's agenda, as Peter Hawkins says? What about your organization's agenda? What about society's agenda? Post George Floyd, post Me Too movement, there are systemic things that need to be thought about and discussed and explored, and that affect how someone thinks and feels, whoever they are. And to willfully cut those off and say, no, I'm going to put my blinkers on, and I'm only going to look at the person in front of me and forget their team, forget their organization, forget their industry, forget their society, forget any sense of nature, forget future stakeholders, such as their grandchildren or godchildren or nieces and nephews. Forget all of that. I'm just only going to follow my client's agenda. It just feels like that is willfully restricting the scope and effectiveness of being able to help a wider selection of stakeholders. I think I've snuck 2 in there, Simone.
That's okay. We'll let you have 2 myths.
Cool.
That's great. So what do you see as the future of coaching? If you're challenging some of the paradigms like coaching, it's not being possible to be non-directional. And I agree with that to a degree. We're all the sum of our parts, and just a coaching session is an intervention that changes a dynamic from the natural state, right? So it's a really interesting thing, if not some may see as provocative. But what do you see as the future of coaching? How is it evolving? You've mentioned AI, and there's so many technologies that could be additive, certainly could be disruptive, hopefully in positive ways. What do you see happening next?
Well, that question is very resonant for me, because buoyed by how much I enjoyed and how well received the 2 series were, I decided to take the step and launch my own podcast myself, called The Edge of Coaching. And the one question I ask every guest is for them to describe in an image or metaphor or object what they see as the future of coaching. So it's really beautiful, really, really beautiful in my heart to be asked that question. I'm very proud to be answering it. It's non-linear, right? So coaching is expanding upwards, sideways, downwards, in every direction. And so at some point, there'll probably need to be some sort of more rigorous codification in the way that psychotherapy and therapy and counseling have come in. At some point, probably next 10 years, I'd imagine. I'd also say that I really believe that a coaching approach helps with complexity, helps with stuckness, helps with not knowing. So I can just really feel and see coaching becoming a lot more mainstream. As I've hinted at today, there are sort of 2 key qualities that I see are very sound investments for anyone coaching today. One would be getting comfortable with systemic, because things aren't binary, things aren't black and white, things aren't simple. And it's very, very rare that someone comes to a coaching session where something is very neat and tidy and there's a simple answer. Especially in leadership, especially uncertainty, our lives, everything is uncertain. So I say, borrowed from a British advertising slogan from the 1990s, I like to say, when it comes to coaching, the future is bright, the future is systemic.
Fantastic.
So the ability and confidence and competence to work with complexity as a coach is incredibly valuable. Also, as I've hinted at before, a relational approach, an ability to be human, to connect with body and soul and spirit and emotion and silliness and creativity and intuition. All these things, they can't really be AI-ified. So, yeah, I mean, I think the future of human coaching is A, systemic, and B, relational.
Fantastic. Yeah, as a technophile myself as well, you see the incredible transformational power of the technology, but it's not at a place, and hopefully won't be, that would ever replace that connection and those qualities that make those interactions and human interactions so special, and create the space for things to emerge and change and growth to happen. The final question I'd love to ask you, and something that I'll be asking everyone throughout the series, so we create a hopefully great insight base from some of the amazing coaching thought leaders that are joining me on the series, is what's the one pearl of wisdom you'd like to offer to a new or aspiring coach?
The one pearl of wisdom I'd offer is to just check in with yourself if you're trying to be this avatar of what you think a coach should be, and trying to do it right and be the perfect coach. All of those things are just unhelpful. I would much rather encourage you to be more of who you are and be more congruent with your experience and in the moment, and just check in with the reality and truth of the present, the very present moment with your client, and be real and be congruent. And instead of trying to be perfect and get caught in your own head of what this idea of a coach should do, to get to a point where you can just be real, be here, right now, and see what that's like to be with your client opposite you, and see what the experience is like.
Thank you, George. That's fantastic wisdom. And thank you for all of the insight and experience you've shared with me today. I know it will be invaluable to new coaches and really anyone in the coaching industry or interested in coaching as an experience. Where can people go to find out more about what you do or to get in touch?
Thank you, Simone. Yes, to anyone that wants to stay connected, I write a lot, so I contribute 2 newsletters on Substack. One is called Slowing Down for Everyone, where I talk about a lot of common subjects swirling around the world, like imposter syndrome and what success means, and general psychological application of what it means to live a good life. And then there's also a newsletter called The Edge of Coaching, which is specifically for those who coach, where I share articles and thoughts and resources. Both go out monthly. Links to those hopefully can be shared in the show notes, but the best way to get in touch would be, and keep in touch and say hello, would be LinkedIn. I'm fairly active on that. And there's also the Edge of Coaching podcast, and that is episodes going out every 2 weeks, and that's available on all platforms as well. Otherwise, drop me an email or get in contact any other way, but be lovely to hear from anyone that wants to say hello or has any questions.
Super. Well, thank you so much, George, for being an excellent first guest, and look forward to working with you ongoing.
Thanks, Simone.
Thank you for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. For 20 years, our purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organizations, and society. To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or explore our webpage at associationforcoaching.com. There, you can keep up to date with our latest podcast episodes, enjoy the wealth of digital learning offerings, and gain insights from our Coaching Perspectives magazine.